Hello, SMITE fans, and welcome back to the final week of Phase 2 in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League, week number 8 and day number 1. My name is J Mac Tucker. I'm going to have Charlie join me on the desk to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into week number 8, we got to give a shout out to our title sponsor of Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League, Prime Gaming. If you don't already have a Prime membership, you should go ahead and get one of those yourself so you can get free 2-day shipping, music, movies, and more. Get all the great stuff that Amazon has to offer to you. Then link that over to your Twitch account and get a whole new catalog of games every single month. Free content and all the kind of games that you're playing, including SMITE and some of the other hi-rez games out there. You get some free skins with there, so make sure that you're utilizing that. Plus, you get a free membership or a free subscription to your favorite Twitch streamer. Use that over here if you want to. Get some cool emotes and just show some support for the game that you love. Thank you so much to Prime Gaming for being the sponsor of Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. As I said, I'm J-Mac. I got Charlie Relly joining me on the desk today as we get ready to jump into our final week of Phase 2. What a statement to say, Charlie. We're in the 8th week of Phase 2. We got Masters coming up immediately after this. That's going to be starting up next week. And we still have some very important matches to go through, starting with today.
Yeah, I mean, the split has absolutely flown by. We've seen some very competitive SMITE. The standings are, as you would expect, extremely close going into a situation like this. So definitely some interesting SMITE to come.
Yeah, and because of the drama that happened last week with a bunch of junglers changing in and out, we now, if you missed everything that's happening on the waiting room, we're going to talk a little bit about it today. We're going to talk about it tomorrow when these two teams play through. The Jade Dragons now have their new permanent jungler in Screammmmm going to be joining in their team. The Solar Scarabs have picked up Sam for Soccer now to be joining their team. We'll talk more about the Scarabs whenever their sets come through. But let's take a look at the schedule and the standings so that way you guys can see what's happening this week. Because we postponed the Dragons and Scarabs match from last week to now this week, make sure that tomorrow and Sunday you're tuning in at 11 a.m. to watch those matchups. But for today, we're going to have the Jade Dragons and the Oni Warriors as our first matches, and then the Olympus Bolts and the Dardez Titans will close out our first day of the final week in Phase number 2. Two really important matches, especially for the Dragons and the Warriors, because as you said, Trelly, and as we'll get to take a look at the standings here to see where everything is, it's a very close battle in that middle of the pack. I mean, first and second seed, not necessarily going to say guaranteed. There's still a chance that the Kings could fall down from that first seed. I assume they would have to lose both of their matchups in order to do so. The Olympus Bolts have potential to take the reins away from that team. But right in the middle of the pack of the standings, that 3rd through 6th seed is so contentious right now. I mean, it's 7-5 versus 5-6 amongst those 4 spots, and even an immediate tie between the Warriors and the Leviathans right in that middle spot at 4th seed.
Yeah, a win right now for the Warriors would be massive. I mean, up against the Jade Dragons and their new roster. Obviously, the Jade Dragons, a win here would also be massive. So both of these teams, I'm sure that this roster change came at a good time for the Dragons, right? Because they realized, hey, we really want to not be 6th seed. Like that would be ideal. We don't want to be in the latter half of these standings. So trying to jump our way up, we need to make a change, and they decided Scream was the change that they needed. So we'll finally get to see, if that's paid off for them.
Yeah, obviously, if you missed Week 7 of the SPL because of league regulations, because of how scrims and things like that were going, Scream couldn't play with the Dragons last week. Instead, now that's been postponed to this week. And what a week the Dragons have ahead of them. If you didn't notice there on the schedule, the Dragons are the opening match on every single day of play. So today they start at 11, then today they started at 1. Tomorrow they started at 11, and then Sunday they also play at 11. So make sure they're tuning in at the beginning of every day because the Dragons have a lot to work with, especially with their new jungler Scream. And I think that's the perfect point to really kind of start out with Trellies, because Scream, we know exactly what he's been able to do with the Solar Scares. I mean, he's one of the highest, now no longer because he missed a week, but one of the highest fantasy point scoring players in the league. Also the most kills in the league still, even despite the fact that he took an entire week off. And this guy has just been one of the biggest pillars for the Solar Scarabs, and now moving over to the Jade Dragons. I mean, how do you feel about Scream in general moving with this team?
Yeah, if it was anyone else switching into the roster at this late into the phase, it would be a little worrisome. But Scream has played with Mike and PandaCat before. They've got some synergy already built up, so I don't think it's going to be that steep of a learning curve, right? We've already known that Scream's been able to be such a hard carry in the league for the Scarabs. I think he'll be able to slot himself in there just fine. It's really just about, what this team wants to accomplish, how much practice they've had together. And, because they've had that team history before, that learning curve's a little bit less steep, right? So I think Scream should be able to slot himself right in.
And Scream has been a very aggressive style of player, which is something that the Jade Dragons have made a name for themselves. Really, between the Dragons and the Scarabs, it feels like Scream is a perfect pick for both of them because of the way that those two teams specifically like to play. The Dragons, they get aggressive early in solo lane, in duo lane, mid lane with Pegon. I mean, we've seen just how active Pegon as a player is in that mid role. And now that you have a jungler to fully complement that playstyle, to be able to get those level 2 ganks over in mid lane, to get those even level 3 to 5 kind of playstyles out there, it really does feel like Scream is going to make at least a decent transition over to this team. Might be a bit of a struggle, at least in maybe the first set or two, but I think on the whole, Charlie, this could definitely be a nice slot for the Dragons.
Yeah, I just realized how scary how lethal that 2v2 is going to be. We know Pegon loves to get active in the early, and of course Scream loves to get active in the early, so who's living through that? You know, you have to draft accordingly, right? Just try and sit at that tower line, not give them any sort of aggression. Don't let them start off to an early lead, but at the very least, for us, because we don't have to actually face them, we just get to watch, it's going to make for some interesting high-action Smite.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very fun set and a very fun team to watch now with Scream over there. And talking about Scream, we do have him standing by for our pregame interview in your Jazzberry Jam hoodie. I can see that you got at least some of the team colors out there. Scream, thanks for coming by for the pregame interview. Tell me what it's like making the transition over to the Dragons now, getting to play with a couple of your former teammates.
I mean, I love it. I love new teams are always fun. They're just exciting to get into. Like, you know, it's a whole new playstyle that I have to learn and adapt to. Same for them. I'm sure it goes both ways. And it's just exciting. You know, I get to play with Panda, I get to play with Mike again. You know, people I won worlds with. So.
Yeah, getting to play with some of the former teammates and maybe a couple of new ones there. So you got fineokay and Pegon now. And we've been noticing that a lot of the action, at least in the jungle, has been kind of around that soul lane in the early game, and then a little bit more towards that mid lane once you start getting close to the mid game. So how does that new dynamic kind of change up with you and fineokay and with you and Pegon?
fineokay and Pegon, I mean, they're great players. So it's not hard to, like, you know, kind of mesh together. I think good players are really adaptable, and I think, you know, figuring out each other's playstyle is rather easy. But I think that there might be some growing pains in the games. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how we play the map. But I think it should be well. It should just work out well.
Yeah, and kind of talking about that, you know, the growing pains of the new team. You know, we saw it a lot with the Scarabs on their previous rosters, having to go through 3-4 different players over the last little bit. Dragons obviously making theirs with the mid. You know, I don't want to necessarily tell you know how long do you think it'll be, but you know, do you kind of have maybe like a relative time frame? You know, kind of thinking what it might take before you're ready, your team is fully ready to go.
I'd probably say like maybe another week or two, depending on how the games go this week. I mean, I expect us to come in and play well. You know, I expect that of us. But you know, we've only had like 3 or 4 scrims. I think you know, another week or two would probably be the best. So around Masters time, I think we could really show up and do something good.
Okay, so maybe expect some top level at least out of the Dragons by that point there. Scream, thanks for coming by for the pregame interview. I'll let you get back with your team. Best of luck in the set.
Thank you.
So maybe a little bit of time to get adjusted with the team, and that's just natural when you bring a new player onto a team. Even if you have played with them before, I mean, we're talking years ago that Scream played with this roster. It wasn't like, oh, you know, I was just playing with them like 6 to 8 months ago, you know, in the previous season. I mean, this is years time separating out those ones, and then obviously having to adjust to 2 completely new players on the team as well. But it seems like so far with just the first few scrims, Scream has been able to make those adjustments with the team and kind of get himself slotted in here a little bit, Trelly.
Yeah, I like what he said about, you know, good players that can adapt to different styles of play very well. So I imagine it won't be that big of a learning curve for fineokay and Pegon. Just going off of what Scream said, I'm not going to put any words in his mouth. He just is saying, you know, we're all very we're top tier players. It shouldn't be that difficult, but it will take some time. So 1 to 2 weeks or so, given that learning curve. I imagine that Scream being a little humble. I think they're going to come out swinging here, but, you know, cover your bases. Just make sure, you know, like, just because the Jade Dragons were on top at one point, they sort of fell by the wayside just a little bit, not the whole way, only about that 6th seed. So there's still going to be some room to grow, and I like that Scream's realizing that, you know, as he joins the squad.
Yeah, and the Dragons, as we saw earlier on the standings, number 6 team, now going against one of the higher seeded teams, at least as of now, the Oni Warriors, a team that has kind of been a little back and forth as far as where they've been kind of leveling out as of recent. You know, there were moments of brilliance. I mean, we look up back against the game against the Titans. It was a 2-0 against that team for the Oni Warriors. We look at the ones, you know, they had a recent loss over to the Valkyries, and that's definitely not something to really be too upset about, but it's something that kind of maybe opens the team's eyes, like, maybe we're not quite as up there as we used to be. Looking over into the jungle, QvoFred has kind of been struggling a little bit in the last couple of weeks, as the Achilles pick that he's been going to has been working out as well for him as it may have been for some of the other players in the league, or maybe just in general. So, I mean, what kind of dynamic shift-ups for the Oni Warriors they need to make moving into this Dragons roster?
Yeah, it's inconsistency has got to be the highlight, right? Because they, as you said, the moments of greatness are extremely great, right? And when you see, you know, Dardez just popping off in that mid lane, Vote can rotate in, level 20, and just make these game-changing plays. It's all up to Qvo to keep the team level up until that point, and I think that's a lot of pressure to put on your jungler, but you're right to highlight that Qvo, he's not one to shy away from that. He recognizes when he's got an off day, and he also recognizes he's got those pop-off moments. He can keep the team energy high. So I do think it's just one of those situations where just getting your God picks down, you know, the Achilles has been, you know, sort of on a teeter-totter in that sense where it's got some great performance, then also falls by the wayside a bit. So it's really just figuring out what works for your team. And I think QvoFred's not a player that's going to take these losses lightly. He definitely is going to take them and learn from them. And I imagine he's going to be able to find that aggression that we know that he can play to.
Yeah, and this dodgy pick, you've been seeing a lot of the highlights of it as we've been talking about Qvo, and that's because that's been one of his top performing gods this phase. It's been one of the top performing gods in general in the jungle. And I imagine with these two teams, with Scream knowing how well he can play that pick, I don't imagine that the dodgy specifically is a pick that makes it too far into the picks and bans, whether that be because she's banned in the top 6 or whether she gets picked in the top 6 by these two teams out here. So I'm very curious to see how the drafting dynamic will change with the Jade Dragons as well, because typically Sam has kind of been that middle zone. Maybe we'll grab him in the top 3. Maybe we'll wait a little bit longer. When you look over with Scream, though, Scream, more often than not, Charlie, we were seeing him kind of be that counter pick whenever it came to him being on the Solar Scarabs.
Yeah, I don't know that we can even predict what's going to happen in that sense because, you know, do you try and facilitate your new jungler and just first pick, get him a hard carry, try to run away with the game, and or do you leave him to how he was? You know, we could just wait to leave jungle till last, figure out the matchup, and see where Scream wants to go. Just because that's the play style that he was accustomed to, I imagine, you know, starting off, that wouldn't be the worst idea, unless something like the Dodgy gets through. You know, Nemesis also extremely powerful. So if one of those picks for some reason gets through, I don't think the Jade Dragons would be afraid of just grabbing that immediately, but letting Scream do Scream things, sit back on the wayside until he can pick his pick, also could be a smart option.
Well, the good news, Charlie, is we don't have to wait very long for the picks and bans. Those are ready to go. Let's jump right in. Game number 1, picks and bans between the Jade Dragons and the Oni Warriors to see exactly where maybe that Dodgy, that Nemesis, and some of those other massive eclectic jungle picks need to come through for both these teams. With the Oni Warriors on that first pick slot, at least for my money's worth, Jade Dragons might look to take the Dodgy away because that's kind of become a pick that is kind of slowly making its way up to being worthy of kind of being that top pick for the team, especially a team like the Oni Warriors.
Yeah, I don't think that the Oni Warriors really want to ban that in the first pick spot. They always want to try and get it if possible. It has so much. It used to be one of those picks that was just a counter pick, right? Whenever you have like no sort of CC immunity, the Dodgy was always something that could be looked at, but now it's just one of those picks that you can grab whenever you want.
Yep. And if you're just now tuning in and maybe you forgot what happened last week, the man on your screen right there, Scream, yes, this is now on the Jade Dragons side, and it will actually be the Oni Warriors in that second pick slot, so maybe an option for them to be able to take that one if the Jade Dragons do not want to grab it for themselves. But the Jade Dragons don't want to leave that one on the field at all. First ban will be the Dodgy, so the jungler going to be taking a hit immediately, and then a Nemesis right after. So I am wondering if this is going to be a battle of the banning the junglers out for both these teams. I mean, we know how pivotal it is for Scream to be able to get some big plays. We know how pivotal it is for QvoFred to get something going for the Oni Warriors. But at least with that third ban and then the fourth ban coming after, a couple of Hunters, so some shots into the mid lane.
Yeah, at the moment, I don't think that any junglers are being as highly contested as the Dodgy and the Nemesis, of course. Erlong, Shen, Osiris, they used to be up at that point and still will receive a ban now and again, but I just don't imagine they're going to be as highly contested as the Assassins that we are seeing taken away. But trying to get rid of that AMC, definitely going to be an option to remove in that slot, and the E set as well. Just one of those picks that no one really enjoys dealing with in the current meta. They don't like having that instant confirm on objectives. I think that's going to be a smart one to take away. And Uller, I mean, he just, for the Jade Dragons, he plays all but the support, essentially. Like, you always got to watch out for that pick, so taking that away, definitely smart. And the Yemoja makes her way to the last ban. Notably, the Khepri is still available, one of those support picks that still has been looked at pretty highly.
Now, one thing I'll propose over to you, Charlie, and I had to confirm to make sure on this, Lancelot now available for competitive play as of week number 8 of the SPL, so potential that we could see that god make his way. I've seen him play jungle, I've seen him play a little bit of mid, though maybe a little bit less often. I've also seen him played in the solo lane, so maybe some potential for the new Assassin and Smite to make his way. And Sphinx's Bauble is available for the players to go through. So gotta imagine we might see some silly shenanigans come with that way. Some silly shenanigans to be coming with that item. I've seen some crazy stuff pop up with this item between supports, solos, jungles, whatever it may be. So many players have been picking up this item, and I'm very curious to see how it's going to do in competitive. But you're right to highlight the Khepri earlier on because it will be the first pick for the Jade Dragons. So now for the Oni Warriors, playing around this Khepri, we've been seeing the Achilles be a big thing out there. But with the win rate of the Achilles, do you think that it feels like a bait pick almost?
I mean, yeah, I would say so, given the fact that the Achilles has not been too successful. We'll see if the Oni Warriors still highlight. I mean, Qvo obviously is confident in his own abilities. You know, we know that to be true. We know his playstyle and his personality. So if he thinks the Achilles is going to work, he will lock it, whether or not people believe in the pick. However, you know, given the fact that it hasn't been able to shut down the Khepri all that well, maybe there's some better options out there. And again, the Jade Dragons have done this because locking in first pick Khepri reveals nothing about your draft. Absolutely nothing. It's just a strong support pick. It doesn't say, hey, we want to go double hunter, we want to go extremely aggressive in the early. It does nothing except grant you extreme safety. And it looks like the Oni Warriors will just grab that Osiris and the Cupid that notably has been just running rampant through the league. The Cupid has been such a menace in that duo lane. Anyone who's playing ADC at the moment has to at least have a Cupid pick in the back pocket or ban it away because it's just too much to deal with. That team fight, that Fields of Love, the ultimate that we talk about so much for being easy to counter, has still been getting tons of value, more specifically into the Khepri, just because that res is really easy to play off of.
I mean, what a world that we've transformed from over the course of the phase. I mean, where we went in Masters and earlier portions of Phase 2, Charlie, where Jingwei was #1 pick, #1 ban every time. Chernobog then kind of took that spot immediately after. Rom was showing his face. And now we're all the way to Cupid being a top pick out of everything. Such a dynamic shift of the meta over the course of these last 8 weeks of the SPL. Osiris hasn't really gone anywhere. He's just kind of sometimes changed from, am I just going to be the jungle, or am I going to be the jungle and the solo laner? I think just as much as Khepri, you were saying, doesn't really reveal anything from the Dragons. Feels like these kind of two picks are the same thing for the Warriors.
I would be extremely shocked if we see that Syl lock in, but the King Arthur is going to bring a ton of pressure in that solo lane. That's a pick that we can often not, and it will be switched out for the Discordia. That makes a ton more sense. So at this point now, you've got that Discordia passive online, which is massive for whoever's going to be getting top damage in your game. When I see King Arthur locked in, usually that just takes the top damage slot, right? So fineokay is going to be getting that massive influx of damage in his lane specifically. I just want to see, you know, some pressure put over to that solo lane. So already, I'm seeing that Scream probably wants to play through solo. Like, just off that Discordia pick and the King Arthur alone, your jungler should be trying to facilitate that Discordia passive. Unless someone else is popping off and doing more damage, which then a King Arthur is difficult in the early, you should be trying to play through that solo lane and get as aggressive as possible. The Oni Warriors, I'm assuming, will see that as well and look to ban some of those junglers out.
Yeah, and the Oni Warriors do have one final pick before they go into the next wave. And talking about picks that haven't really been as popular, Hera, a god that's usually reserved over for players like Big Man Tings and Dardez here for the Oni Warriors. 75% win rate on this mage, 100% win rate on the Discordia. Only 4 games played for each of those ones, so Discordia has been slightly more successful, at least, than the Hera in that regard. But how do you kind of feel about Hera? I mean, we don't see her very often. It's usually only a couple of players in the league going with this one. I think Paul maybe brought her out one time previously, as we see the Erlong Shenben. But how do you kind of feel about Hera in the current meta?
Yeah, in the current meta, if you're not Dardez, like, I think there's other mages that certainly do bring that level of burst and safety, but when you've been playing Hera for as long as Dardez has, I feel confident in the pick no matter what, right? Discordia is one of those characters that has to get relatively close to the lane to clear. Hera has to do so as well. They both have some ranged poke against each other, so it's not a terrible matchup in that regard as long as you're able to just farm safely and play around the tanks of your team. I don't think the Hera is going to be a detriment to the team comp at all. It's hard to say that it's going to be one of those insane picks just given on the matchup alone. It really just depends on how well you're able to stay safe and farmed. We haven't seen the jungler of the Jade Dragons yet, so I can't really say if Dardez is going to be extremely safe in that lane. We see the Fenrir taken away and the Erlong Shen, so trying to ban away some of that early pressure, definitely smart. Hera wants to wait a bit to get online.
And then Xing Shen and Ymir on the other side for the Jade Dragons as their final bans before we hop on in. So with the Osiris, can still assume that this one might be going over, at least to QvoFred in the jungle, though still flexibility for Nika to play that one in the solo lane. We'll have to wait and see what the rest of the Warriors draft finds out to be. Ganesh doesn't answer the question as to where Osiris is going to be going. But you're talking about, maybe with this Hera and potentially Osiris wanting to put that pressure over in the mid lane, not knowing what the jungler is for the Jade Dragons, and seeing that this King Arthur is over for the Dragons. Do you imagine then that if the Dragons are going to put that focus over in the solo lane, that the Oni Warriors with this current composition, with this potential 3v3 of Osiris, Hera, Ganesh, that they just want to try and put the hurt on Pegon in mid?
Yeah, it certainly could be the option, and if this Artemis gets locked in, trying to focus out duo lane also could be an option. It really just depends on where Scream is and what he's playing. They are holding on to this pick for a while, and it looks like Sukuyomi. I mean, this is a pick that we haven't seen too much at all. Only 3 times played, but I guess, you know, in that regard, Discordia and Hera only 4 times played, so not seeing that much, and it will be the Artemis. So this is, interestingly enough, with a Khepri, usually this is more of like an engage/re-engage team, but with Tsukuyomi and Artemis, this is an all-or-nothing style draft. I mean, you are using that Piercing Moonlight, you are dropping Tusky, and you are going in, and if that doesn't work, your re-engage is not the best. You're essentially in or you're out. So I guess the plan here could be let Scream go in with that Piercing Moonlight, res him with the Scarab's Blessing, get out, and then re-engage, and or just you're going. Like, you are W keying. There is no re-engage. Up into a Cthulhu, it's certainly not going to be easy. You're going to be splitting up the fight a lot with that Descent into Madness. So I do like both of these drafts here. It really just depends on which team can find that early aggression. Off the back of a Discordia passive, the Jade Dragons have a pretty good start.
You know, now that we do have this Cthulhu locked in, it will confirm that the Osiris is going over into the jungle for QvoFred. So no Achilles this time around, so we'll at least get to see a little bit of mercy away from that god, at least at the time. But talking about the Cthulhu, it's one of the things that we always bring up is being able to deal with the Cthulhu, having the damage output to be able to shred through that HP bar once we start getting to the late game, and he has upwards of 3,500 4K HP when he's going into that Madness form. Do you think that the Jade Dragons have a composition to be able to deal with the front line that the Oni Warriors have put together?
Oh yeah, the Jade Dragons essentially have only drafted damage, right? You have the Khepri res, you got King Arthur to sort of go in the back line, and then it's just Discordia, Tsukuyomi, Artemis. They are all just trying to get online and do as much DPS as possible. There's not too much survivability there, right? Like, Artemis is not going to be able to disengage unless she just runs out and no one's chasing her, which is not an easy thing to do. Discordia has a very small leap. It's not going to cover much ground, but what it will do is reset those cooldowns and give you more damage that you can use to engage. I'm not seeing lots of disengage. It's more so all in. So the Jade Dragons definitely have the DPS to deal with a Cthulhu ult. It really just depends on if they're able to get that off safely, and if they fall behind, it's going to get much harder because, again, in a matchup like this, Tsukuyomi ults in. If you're going into Cupid, you're landing in a Fields of Love, like, for sure. If the ultimate is available, that's where you're going to be landing. So it's not an easy task, but Scream definitely a jungler who can control that ultimate and say, I'm not going to go in if they have Aegis up. I'm not going to go in if I'm going to land on an Argus. Like, those sort of things aren't going to happen. You got to make sure you're confirming those kills with an ultimate like that.
And kind of talking a little bit about that Fields of Love and maybe just kind of the overall team fight that now the Oni Warriors have. I mean, you're fighting into Fields of Love. You're fighting into a Dharmic Pillar, into Argus as a 6-man there with Hera. So when it comes down to the late game team fights, is there kind of maybe a favoritism for you, kind of swaying one way or the other, Charlie, for these? Once we start getting, let's call it like the 25-30 minute mark.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult because I think if you can force PandaCat to ult early, if Tusky gets dropped before PandaCat wants to drop that boar, then Artemis falls off a ton, right? You are engaging with that ultimate or you are getting out. So if you can force that out with the Descent into Madness, with the Dharmic Pillars, anything like that, even just Fields of Love. If you're dropping Fields of Love for Tusky and then re-engaging, your fight's going to be a lot easier. The Oni Warriors are going to have to drop that Caledonian boar and then not die. If they can just not die to Tusky, their fight after the fact is going to look really solid.
Now, if I remember correctly, when Scream kind of played the Pele a couple weeks ago up against the Camelot Kings, we were asking him, maybe, is there some change-ups as far as the build is concerned with the jungle? We'll see if those kind of change-ups come through with the Tsukuyomi. Can the Jade Dragons and their new jungler find a win in Game 1 against the Warriors? Let's jump in and find out.
My goodness, what a storyline going into this week in the SPL. Jade Dragons and the Oni Warriors start us off, and Gormizer, the shiny new jungler of the Jade Dragons, is here to play. It is Scream. So, if you didn't watch Waiting Room this week, or last week, or watch any of our cast last week, welcome to the SPL. You're right, because Gore has been a part of all of it. Sanford Soccer has been not only with the Jade Dragons core, but with the core of fineokay, PBM, PandaCat for a while now.
Yeah, years.
Pegon joins this team at the beginning of the year. Didn't feel like they were getting it done. So Sanford Soccer off of the team, now joins the Solar Scarabs, who have swapped their jungler Scream here with the Jade Dragons. This is a good first look at how dynamic this pickup can be.
And and Mike had mentioned it on his stream. If anybody didn't watch that and you want like very big insight into the players' thoughts, the team's thoughts on that, Mike did like this huge Q&A where he was just talking about, what exactly went through. And there was like no bad blood. It was literally just a decision on, hey, we want to win more and we think that this has been the problem. And he mentioned that it's not the first time that that's come up, right? And it's the same thing I think the Scarabs had said. There's been roster discussions in the past, but never anything that truly happened. And unfortunately for them, it happened for them, and now well, they're finding themselves here. Whereas the Dragons, again, you know, we were talking about it. Myth said it last week. I reiterated that earlier on Waiting Room, where Scream is either a lateral trade, and we're going to get the same kind of Dragons that we've got over the last couple of years, or it's an upward trade. Because you have to remember, you know, PandaCat, PBM, Scream, they won a world championship together. Last time any of them won. So going back together, you know, there's conversations, why didn't they stick together? What's changed since then to now? You know, things like that. But I think that we get to see maybe a renaissance of the Jade Dragons, not only at the end here of Phase 2, but really, I think, going in towards Phase 3.
Yeah, I don't know. Scream is such a dynamic player out of the jungle.
Yeah.
Which is really...
He's playing Tsukuyomi.
Right, playing
so
Tsukuyomi
you know
in the jungle. Yeah, we have to talk about his pick at some point. But also, I mean, you look at what he brought to the Solar Scarabs, and a chance maybe for an early kill here for the Jade Dragons. New jungler QvoFred caught invading the Jade Dragon side of the jungle. Scream will be stunned by Nika. And so First Blood will go searching. Jade Dragons do get a little bit of farm stolen away.
It is worth noting that Scream is like, he's the First Blood king of this. He has the most First Bloods. He did a week without playing last week. Still has the most kills in the SPL. Still has the most First Bloods in the SPL.
Yep.
And at least for this phase. And honestly, and this year. So you know what to expect from this kind of playstyle. And I have to imagine that the Warriors are keeping some of that in their mind, right? If you're looking at this as a team that we know has had early aggression in the past, has been very adept at early aggression. Scream on the Scarabs was able to find a lot of pressure towards the right-hand lane. I'm not surprised to see him hanging out with fineokay, because that's kind of how they've been playing. Him and Scary D were hanging out together for a lot of it. But I'm curious, you know, like how it melds with him and Pegon and mid. We heard a lot from the Scarabs this year about how vocal Scream is and you know, integral in shot calls. And having someone like that in the jungle and in your support, which Mike is as well, means that you're going to have some of, I would argue, maybe some of the best comms that you could have in competitive, because it feels like everything should be known pretty much map-wide, and I'm curious to see how well that impacts them. Again, they've only had like a week to play with him, but it has been, I think, a probably productive week for them if they've been kind of nose of the grind stuff. Yeah,
you know, in Scream, we looked at, what was it, 2 weeks ago we looked at the waiting room stats between Scream and Sanford Soccer.
Yeah.
Sam actually had a better KDA, but much fewer kills, slightly more assists. It was really the deaths that felt different. So you're getting a higher octane player.
He's going to be in there and he's going to die, but he's going to get
some kills and he's going to get some assists. And it feels like that, you know, if we're warranting some credit to the Jade Dragons and their decision-making as far as the roster goes, feels like maybe a spark that the team has been missing. Think back to the Jade Dragons roster of last year before. Now, the meta's changed. It's slowed down a bit in the early. Might not be favoring that type of play style from the Dragons, but Scream is nothing if not that type of player. So I think this team, to your point and the waiting room's point, at least a lateral move, right? But, but hoping that it'll be somewhere on the rise. I want to talk about the Scarabs a lot too. And there's just so much to sink your teeth into.
Well, hey, I've got good news. Tomorrow, they're going to play each other. So we can
my
talk about both.
That'll be a really exciting matchup between those two squads. Let's look a bit at the game itself, though, that we've got here. We'll follow along Scream not only today, not only tomorrow, but on Sunday. Triple header for the Dragons and a double stun for the Dragons over in the duo lane. Won't result in much. Looks like a blue buff invade on the mind of the Oni Warriors. QvoFred, Nika, and Dardez, all three here against the two of the Jade Dragons. And the blue buff with that much pressure needs to be dropped. Splitting it 3 ways, more about denial than getting golden XP for yourself.
Yeah, it's just pressure at that point, right? Trying to make sure that Scream doesn't get some farm a little bit more towards Qvo. You can see it. Even though split 3 ways, he now hits level 6 right before Scream. Osiris, you know, we talked about it a lot at the beginning of the year, and I think a lot through last year, but can get hands on level 3, right? He immediately can start kicking things off. But what we've been seeing, specifically out of junglers, and I think Qvo falls on this list, you know, Lasber's done this as well, but it's been waiting to that level 8, level 9 mark, and then we start to see Osiris really getting a little more hands-on. And I'm curious as to how that's going to match up, because in theory, he's going to be online faster than Tsukuyomi. I mean, look at his build. He's gone for the mannequins. I'm assuming it's going to be a golden blade versus having the Bumba's dagger into a transcendence. Like, Scream is going to be farming. He might be able to get active. His ult's good for getting in there, which is great for what we just said Scream likes to do. but it is going to take a little bit longer for him to deal and have the same damage output. And having that little bit of experience difference between the two of them, even though it's not a ton, is still going to be, I think, a big matter. Looking at it, it's like a minion that's really separating them, but that is a big deal, I think, going in towards these next couple of levels. Slows are going to be very, very potent from Osiris. And Discordia, while she has a dash to get away, doesn't go as far as some of the other mages can or as other gods can. So I think that's going to be a big opportunity for them to try and chase that down.
Well, Gore, how about the way that the solo laners have started to build here with healing a bit on the mind of both of them? You get Pythag's piece for Nika. And now Pythag's piece has been looked at pretty consistently since the changes. You get the lifesteal, of course. More utility for the rest of your team. Maybe make some sense to pick up on Cthulhu.
I mean, you get health. I think in this matchup, it's going to feel nice. What's interesting to me is, and we've been seeing it a little bit more recently, I think this build has not been uncommon, but it's usually in solo lane, you're always going for like a prot item first. That health is only going to help you so much.
Nika might use some of that healing now as not only a blue buff invade, but a fight breaks out. Screammmmm, the new jungler for the Dragons. He'll fall first in this game, and the Oni Warriors knock down the Tsukiyomi. Argus is here to play as well as Nika drops from the ultimate, and fineokay has one of his own, but it looks like Nika's gonna get out. Pegon has now fallen, and PolarBearMike also here on the right side of the map. fineokay has turned one around onto QvoFred, but now it's 2 versus 3, and it looks like it'll end at a 2-for-1 for the Onis.
It probably could have been a little bit more. fineokay, might have been able to continue chasing down Nika. But Argus was tanking the tower there for Cuba. fineokay is still going to chase him down. I actually like his damage chances here.
Oh man, fineokay, another charge of the knockup, gets polymorphed and rooted. And that's got to be the last bit of it here for the Jade Dragons. So first blood plus another to the Oni Warriors for a fineokay trade out. We talked a bit about the healing items that got picked up. On one side you had Nika, the Pythag's piece. I think that probably helped out in that fight a decent bit. And then Mail of Renewal, Gore, not only for fineokay, but looks like PBM picks that up as well. So you're going to have that big burst heal for a couple members of the Jade Dragons.
Yeah, and again, something that will feel nice because you have to realize, like, not only the passive, but PBM's also gone for this med. So there's going to be a lot of healing. You've got Khepri ult. You've got a lot of survivability, I think, built into the Dragons here. And you could see some of that. Under that tower, Mike probably should have died. With that amount of presence and Argus and all of them, it feels like he should have gone down. But again, being able to keep yourself not only sustained with your own Mail of Renewal, but also having the meditation, at least keeps them rolling forward.
Yep.
And it does create a big separation. We were talking about Scream, and at least I had said that he's going to take a little while to get online. And normally he's known for getting first bloods. Him getting first blooded and falling behind is going to be a big deal for whether or not the Dragons will be able to ride this power curve into the late game.
Yeah, Mike wasn't able to use the Scarab's Blessing in that last fight. Definitely be disruptive against the Oni Warriors. You look at a lot of the burst damage they've got, Lockdown, Fields of Love, the Mire from Nika, and some of that single target burst going to get mitigated out by PolarBearMike on the Scarab's Blessing. And Mike has not only gone Mail of Renewal first, but he's also fully upgraded his med.
Yeah.
So delaying his item tree out here a little bit. So Scarab's Blessing, great, but also providing more utility with the rest of his team, getting that cloak. I don't even know, how do you pronounce that?
Aesthetic is
I was
how
gonna say
I would.
aesthetic, like,
Aesthetic.
but that's not it.
It's a very aesthetically pleasing cloak.
It sure is, and Mike's bought it. It's because it looks good, I guess.
Only because it looks good. No, I mean, think about it. That cooldown reduction is going to be nice. And honestly, when you're looking at some of these people, King Arthur is going to spam a lot of abilities because of the way his kit works. For Scream, it means that maybe he's going to be able to get that extra bit of damage out there that otherwise wouldn't have happened. But I'm looking at Pegon, who all of a sudden is going to have his stim up a little bit more often whenever that med is popped.
Yep.
And Pegon, who's going to have that stim up more often. Pegon in mid with his own cooldown reduction in the Disco 3 is also then going to be able to have that, like, I'm talking spamming abilities, and it's going to be, I think, a lot of fun to see what he can do in some of those late game excursions. It should be a big burst of damage around an FG fight when med gets popped.
Now, Gore, on the flip side, NeilMah on this Ganesh, talk about spamming abilities, especially supports. Dharmic Pillar's maybe the most spammable support ultimate right now. And this brings rise to some topics maybe later on today. NeilMah not going for it yet, but Bobble an option. We wondered if we would see the Chronos Pendant Bobble Hyper CDR type of build on certain supports where lockdown and CC and objective secure is really what they're there for, and Ganesh does seem like that. So not there yet, not even Chronos Pendant yet for NeilMah. But again, still low enough on that cooldown to use it pretty frequently.
What's wild to think about is, like, because we did the math for it, I think it was like 50 seconds or something like that for a Chronos Pendant, and that's just a little bit of CDR in comparison for a Ganesh ult. I mean, that's insane.
And another blue buff invade for the Oni Warriors, and another successful one at that. fineokay doesn't want to let it go quietly, though. He'll connect with one onto his ultimate. Polymorph out from Dardez, and the apple on a Dardez as well. Piercing Moonlight finds the backline, and Scream with his first kill as a Jade Dragon knocks down Dardez. The rest of the fight running towards the Oni Warriors in their tier 1 tower. Mike has Scarab's Blessing. He can afford to play a bit more aggressively here as long as the support and the jungler are on the same page, and it's a bit early, but the tower procs it off, and Scream is pulled back. And Nika dropped by Pegon.
Yeah, I like the call from Qvo and Neil. At a certain point, you just kind of have to let that one go. Unfortunately, there's the D-transformation from Nika, and it's easy to swarm forward like that. It's Scream, I think they play it really well. They reset the tower onto him, they throw the ult onto Scream, and just let them play aggressive. Yeah, Pegon gets that last kill, but Scream picks up one in the process, helps kind of alleviate some of that pressure. Still technically behind where Qvo is. This Pyro should change, I think, a little bit of that. But you're really starting to see, I think, where this team can morph together. And it's going to be, I think, even more interesting. I mean, he's almost done stacking that Transcendence, almost has that second item fully bought. And so at this point, I'm looking at a Tsukuyomi who is going to be powerful. And he's going to be able to hit pretty hard. And if you see something like a Piercing Moonlight that happens to get back to, let's say, Dardez, that's going to be a kill more often than not. And I think that that's going to be something that Dardez has to deal with. Polymorphs, things like that, CC, you know, when you have Argus up, we know Dardez is a very adept Hera player, and it's going to be difficult, I think, for Scream in certain circumstances. But as long as you've got Mike around, and that ult's up from a Khepri, you can play a little loose.
Well, and if you're a Dragons fan, that's giving you some confidence right now that the early, I mean, that is a simple call, right? But the early levels of communication are there. The base layers are there between Mike and Jungler.
Yeah.
You dive, I got a blessing for
Not only that, I think even more to that point, you know, Scream looked like he wanted to chase down either Neil or Qvo.
Yeah.
But the rest of the Dragons were focusing Nika, and he immediately turned. Like, I could almost feel the call for the kill there. And in moments like that, you know, you don't get to see them as often in the grand scheme. Luckily, we have the top-down view, so you get to kind of see the pieces on the chessboard. But it makes it a lot more interesting to see what their mindset is at, you know, where maybe he was thinking at versus where some of the others were thinking, and then how the agreements work. Because sometimes that's always, like, the big thing is we know they've played together in the past, but disagreements can still happen, especially in-game and on-field.
Of course.
And so it's nice to see that they're at least on the same page.
Now the Oni Warriors not super worried about it. They've they had an early gold lead rather, traded back by the Jade Dragons over the last couple of minutes. Now QvoFred with beads and tether out onto Scream, stuns him in the Dharmic Pillars, and it's a Scarab's Blessing out from Mike, but Mike may have needed it for himself. The silence devastating from NeilMah, but Mike is able to scurry away. Scream has gone into the back line and now has Piercing Moonlight. Already one kill on the board for Scream. fineokay adds another, and the Jade Dragons looking to continue diving onto NeilMah. Fields of Love out from Vote, though. Delays the escape, and Vote actually trades out one, but the Jade Dragons happy with the 3-for-1.
I mean, the heart bomb, Fields of Love pop there to pick up Scream feels good. But you know what, Dave? He's doing it too. It's exactly what we were saying. He's going to go in, he's going to get kills, he's going to die, but it's going to get the job done because it is 3-for-1 trade. The Warriors lose, I think, some of the most important members to have up. You know, starting that fight, jumping onto Qvo. I think that loop around was beautiful. You were talking about it, how Mike gets out of there, but Scream re-aggresses into the fight and kind of forces the Warriors into the jungle, away from the tier 1 and mid, away from the safety net. And then it's just a simple matter of, like you said, Piercing Moonlight into the back. fineokay is just already there because he's King Arthur and he's a nuisance and he's chasing them down. I think they did a really good job of pulling the Warriors into a spot that wasn't going to be a comfortable engagement for them, then diving deep, which is what this comp can do well, and getting a lot of kills for it. And yeah, it costs them a life, but sometimes it's going to be worthwhile. We also get to see some interesting tech that I'm always a big fan of, and something that I think is going to be interesting to watch as the Hunters join the fray. especially depending on, Golden Hand, 2,500. So it should be a big item purchase here for Vote as well, Silver Branch, to match the chin size that were just bought by PandaCat. But Artemis, you proc your stem. A lot of the time we're talking about attack speed. Man, that feels really good. And this specific matchup, we're talking about immunity to slows, and it's specifically to help out up against this Q.
Uh-oh, Neil stunned by Tusky. fineokay with the slash, the dash, and the damage. Finds himself on a killing spree. fineokay has put together a fantastic performance so far. He'll have a chance to continue that around this Gold Fury. If the Oni Warriors choose to step up, drop down to about 50% HP, Nika blinks forward, dashes forward as Argus drops from the heavens, and up goes Nika. PolarBearMike needs to use the Scarab's Blessing. It's on to Pegon this time. Well placed, but it is not procced, so Pegon will have to leave and maybe better off for it because QvoFred chasing down Mike over by the red buff, and that's the first kill of the fight, and it's to the Oni Warriors.
I mean, that's a really good bait from the Dragons to start things off. Unfortunately, I don't think they factored in the team fight ultimates from the Warriors. I mean, Nika shows up and just absolutely changes that fight for them. They still have enough damage. This is not a winning fight for the Warriors handedly.
Scream still has Piercing Moonlight after that fight. He'll go into the back
Look at
line.
this.
Won't execute anyone, but what an unreal turnaround from the Jade Dragons. Scream bought his time, and the Dragons rally around their new jungler, and they'll knock down 4 members of the Oni Warriors and get themselves a Gold Fury.
I'm floored with how well that worked out. Look, anybody, any other team, any other players in the league, you're probably just poking the Oni Warriors out and then falling back. That was phenomenal of a re-engage. Ignore the fact that they got 4 kills for a second. Just to get in there that well, the damage output from PandaCat and specifically dropping Tusky super early, stunning the Warriors. They're taking damage from the Fury, and PandaCat's not shooting down Nika. He's not shooting down Dardez. He's killing Argus. And
You gotta look back
just
at it.
like watch, because specifically getting rid of the guy tanking it. Now they're gonna start taking damage from the Fury. Vote comes up too soon, but they separate. Scream's able to dive into the back, and in the meantime, you're shredding health bars if you're PandaCat. I mean, that's just so well done. fineokay gets to come in, but that's a ridiculous amount of damage in such a short amount of time.
I assume the Gold Fury did a decent chunk of that, but also the Piercing Moonlight from Scream
Hit hard.
shredded the backline, and that's, you know, look, this is a zoomed out conversation. Junglers over the last handful of weeks here in the SPL have loved playing these warrior styles. Pyromancer to the Jade Dragons in the meantime. Look, I mean, Erlang Shen, Osiris, feels like 75% of the games, one of the two is in the jungle, and I do think they have their place. But like an automatic backline damage and dive from a Piercing Moonlight, hard to argue against in a game like this, and Scream making it work. 3, 2, and 6 on his debut for the Dragons. As the Dragons pull out the FG, bit of a split engagement. QvoFred will have to use the Lord of the Afterlife to get out. fineokay separating the rest of the Oni Warriors on the backside of the jungle. I think health bar is just a bit too low to stick on the FG.
Yeah, I think this is one, again, that one was another bait. Try to see who you can pull in. They're going to go on Cubo.
Cubo doesn't have ult. He walks forward,
He's just there.
gets rooted, gets killed off. Piercing Moonlight from Scream gets it done yet again, but this time it's PandaCat who notches the killing spree for the Jade Dragons. You are in a 5 versus 4, and Gore, you got Scarab's Blessing, so you might be feeling all right about your chances to fight, but you do not have your backline guaranteed dive with Piercing Moonlight. So still a bit of an awkward spot for the Dragons. Looks like they'll be happy with the pick.
I mean, yeah, numbers advantage in a position like this feels pretty solid, at least in terms of control. I think really now it's going to be about ward control coming back in, resetting. You lose a couple of relics there if you're Mike, which is going to be a big deal. You're waiting for a Mail of Renewal reset. That ICD is about to go off, so fineokay will be able to join the fight a little bit more. I'm also interested because Mike, you know, we've been talking about this, like slightly less, let's call them tanky builds in the support role. Mail of Renewal up front. And then we talked a lot about Magi's Revenge because it's been picked up by a lot of junglers. Magi's Shelter has not been picked up as often, but being able to choose a nearest, well, not choose, a nearest god, getting that whenever your bubble is popped, and then they are going to have protection from a single hard CC. I mean, you're looking at Pegon or Scream or Panda or Fine. Somebody on the team is all of a sudden not going to get stunned, or they're not going to get polymorphed, or they're not going to get rooted. Like, something is going to be saved, and that's going to allow, if you're fineokay or Scream, you can continue aggressing. If you're Pegon or PandaCat, that means that you can get out a little bit more. And so I think that this is an interesting pickup. Just one, because it's kind of been devoid. It's the one glyph.
Well, 25
between the
units,
two that we
you got to
haven't
be
seen
close.
there. You got to be hugging.
Right.
But he's a hug bug, so it makes
Right,
sense.
he is the hug bug. Yeah, it doesn't go to the opposing team. It doesn't work with abduct. Yeah, I want to keep my eyes on that because a small moment like that, because it's a free beads in a way. A lot has to go right for you to get full value out of it.
Yeah.
But love the mindset here from Mike, more utility-based. The Jade Dragons crest over the 9,000 gold lead mark here about 21 minutes in. Should give them some confidence around this Fire Giant. They will start to burn it, the Jade Dragons. Oni Warriors will step forward. A lot of the backline dive hasn't been working for the Onis, has been working for the Dragons though, and fineokay, another iteration of that. Dardez simply run down by this King Arthur. A piercing moonlight connects as well, but Argus for some peel. NeilMah in there as well. Dardez finally taken down by PandaCat. That's the Odibo doing serious work on the front of this fight. And another one-kill pick for the Dragons.
And I really love PandaCat's build here because it does so much damage versus the Cthulhu specifically that in moments, he doesn't even focus him down that often there, but if he does, it's just going to be a death.
It's a nice double strike from Pegon. fineokay in there for some follow-up. And again, the Lord of the Afterlife out. I have not seen that aggressive from QvoFred in a minute. Fire Giant low. Fire Giant nearly stolen, but the Jade Dragons confirm it for themselves. Mike drops the Scarab's Blessing onto his head, revives himself, and a kill to go for Pegon.
I mean, just look, what a set of plays. They go in, they know where they're diving, they kill off Dardez, they know what their goal is, and fineokay, even Polymorphed was pressing the W key to get back there. You get that kill, feels like enough on its own. Neil, in this instance, is just icing on top of the cake that is the Fire Giant. But, you're mentioning it. You're getting Cthulhu ults that aren't really changing the game for the Warriors because they're just dealing too much damage. Qvo's being forced to retreat. And unfortunately for Vote, they've got a sprint. And if they don't have a sprint, you've got a couple of dashes that get you out of there. PandaCat has slow immunity in the kit. So you throw out a Fields of Love and they just walk away from it. They don't have to do too much. And then you got to talk about it. Strife... There's a very few, and this is a weird list to have, but I have lists of favorite CCs in the game. Strife is on that list, and because when you hit two people with it, it feels great. Nice big rectangle. Recently, again, does a little bit more damage because of the mid-season buffs Discordia got to see. Plus, you're factoring in the cooldown that's already built into this, the cooldown that you're going to have from your 3, the cooldown that you're getting from Mike's med, and things like that. All of a sudden, it just feels like it's going to be really solid, I think, for everybody involved. So for Pegon hitting a big Strife, getting good damage out there, it just really sets the team up.
Time for the Jade Dragons to siege up the left side Phoenix. They massive 10,000 gold lead and Fire Giant on all 5. Everyone from the Dragons has really stepped up in this game. fineokay on the King Arthur. Rewinding the clock a bit, 406, 405 for PandaCat. A miraculous performance from a new-look Jade Dragons. Oni Warriors, an opportunity to defend under this left side Phoenix. Haven't shied away from stepping up yet. Why stop now? Vote dashes away, but drops to Fields of Love in the meantime. Apple through from Pegon. That's on NeilMah. A Dark Pillar separates out the front line. But again, the slow whittle damage from the Dragons enough to get the Phoenix.
Yes, it was one auto there for what felt like 10 seconds. Finally, fineokay just walks up and smacks it. I mean, admittedly, that's a good Dharmic Pillars placement from Neil, making sure that it's a little more difficult for the Dragons to try and engage as deep as they otherwise more than likely could have. Pegon uses his ult. We saw Tusky get dropped, so a couple of aggressive utilities taken away from the Dragons. You still have Piercing Moonlight. You still have a Scarab's Blessing, which is maybe the biggest essence. Pegon's going to get his ult back, no problem. PandaCat, guess what? They're going to have it back, no problem. You get to siege down the left side Phoenix, get some very important fire minion spawning, and a Fury on top of that. It's gold lining the pockets now. You got 3 towers elsewhere on the map, so I think if you're the Dragons, at this point, actually just staying alive.
Wow, the Oni Warriors trying to fight before the Dragons can reset after their Phoenix, and it's Pegon who's low, but gets the Scarab's Blessing from PolarBearMike. Double stun in the back line, and a knock-up from fineokay, and the King Arthur continues to wreak havoc on all of the Oni Warriors. Argus with a double knock-up of his own, so a good answer back from Dardez. Looks like might be a disengage on that.
Now the Warriors, I feel like you can't really take this fight, but no, look, the CC's good from the Dragons still.
NeilMah drops Dharmic Pillars, but the Jade Dragons drop NeilMah. Scream has gotten QvoFred as well. And Gore, these are massive death timers, 40 or so seconds on both Quvo and NeilMah, and still 30 seconds on the FG.
Yeah,
buff.
with this, not even EFG, with this SG, you can at
what a
least
play.
run down mid to the Phoenix.
Wow, fineokay teleports in behind the Oni Warriors. Nika, he'll get run down by Fino, who's on a rampage, and it looks like the Jade Dragons have an opening to end the game. It's only the carries alive. 15 seconds on NeilMah. You need to delay this out if you want a chance if you're the Oni Warriors, but the Dragons can turn their eyes towards the Titan. A Fields of Love will slow down the offense. NeilMah still 5 seconds away, and they're simply not enough. The Oni Warriors, they will fall in game number 1 to the Jade Dragons in their new jungle.
I think if at any point over the last week during the discussion about these jungle changes, you thought that the Dragons were going to struggle maybe for a little bit, this was maybe the most reassuring game for them. I mean, there are a lot of plays. Look, I don't think it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows for them in the future, right? There's definitely going to be some losses, and some of them are going to be tough. But I just saw some of the best Dragons plays in that one game.
Yeah.
Maybe to balance out the rest of the year. I mean, there were so many moments that it didn't feel like anything could happen. I mean, even that resurgence there at the bottom left jungle.
Right.
Screammmmm and everybody, they're getting aggressive. Didn't use the piercing moonlight for the longest time because he didn't have to. fineokay teleporting forward. I mean, things like that, shot calls like that, this team, that to me felt like evidence that they have leveled up.
Agreed. It's a good look, Jade Dragons. I mean, think about how quickly this game suddenly ends, and the styles of games that we've had this phase. You don't get these sudden game ends very often. The Jade Dragons, they'll get it done. Screammmmm, the new jungler, looking good. Game number 1 for the Jade Dragons. Number 2 against the Oni Warriors. Coming up next.
They got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems. I solve them. I run through the money. The pressure be calling. Left on my blessings. I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back. Tell me I'm garbage. I'm going through something. That's why I ain't calling. Phone and progression is all that I wanted. The phone and affection. I summon and dub it. Cause I got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems. I solve them. I run through the money. The pressure be calling. Left on my blessings. I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back. Tell me I'm garbage. I'm going through something. That's why I ain't calling. Phone and progression is all that I wanted. The phone and affection. I summon and about nothing, why won't you go get you $1 or something? Don't hang with a line for nothing. I see that we different, you riding, I double. I don't do discussions on bragging about hundreds. Don't go to your places, I know that they sunken. Don't call me your brother, I barely could trust you. I talked to a shorty, she bagging the bucket. And I'ma need all of my dollars on corporate, so hand me the money, I divvy the pie. I'ma give all of my people a portion to build them a fortune, I'm flipping the ride. I can't be mixy when iffy to rob, and 40 on 50 is really the time. Why are you all on my phone like you want me? Like you wasn't pushing the kid to the side, I don't know if you thinking of blood, cross on my crosses and dirt on my eyes. Done with your efforts, I'm dealing with pressures. I know it's a lesson, that's word of the wise. Dubbing the mixes, I'm mixing. I know I've been missing, I needed some personal time. All the pictures, dimensions, I know what you did this, I mean it, I'm staying inside. Problems, I solve them. I run through the money, the pressure be calling. Left on my blessings, I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back. Tell me I'm garbage, I'm going through something, that's why I ain't calling. Phone and progression is all that I wanted. The phone and affection, I summon and dumb it. Cause I got problems on problems on problems on problems on problems on problems, I solve them. I run through the money, the pressure be calling. Left on my blessings, I feel like I'm falling. The birdie is back. Tell me I'm garbage, I'm going through something, that's why I ain't calling. Phone and progression is all that I wanted. The phone and affection, I summon and dumb.
What's up, Smite fans? Dolson here, and Season 9 of the SPL is shaping up to be maybe the best ever. And to help us get there, we're partnering with Alienware to provide us, our players, the production team, with state-of-the-art gear to make this year one of the best yet. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear what the pros have to say.
As a professional player, it's super important to make sure that you just have the absolute highest quality gear and peripherals that you can ever get. And having an Alienware PC has completely upped our game here at the SPL.
It's really nice being able to play from the same PC from home into the studio, and I highly, highly recommend it. It feels great to play on.
So I really enjoyed using Alienware computers because, one, I'm a streamer, content is my job, and the power of the Alienware PCs is like amazing. It's perfect for everything that we need to do.
I stream 1080p, no problem. I have no issues with FPS, no frame lag or anything like that.
64 gigabytes of RAM is just something that you can only dream of, and like it helps so much with processing like anything that you need to perform, like multitasking, whether it's streaming, recording, gaming, like everything all at once, and it's been a very smooth experience.
As someone who doesn't enjoy building my own PC, the Alienware's kind of got everything in one machine. It was super easy.
I really like the pre-built Alienware as well because it's really hard to get a graphics card on the market currently.
A 3090 is like impossible to obtain, so being able to play on it has been honestly a very lucky experience.
Back in the day, I used to game and do all my content on a really pathetic laptop, and once I actually was able to get an Alienware PC, there's just no turning back.
For a lot of players that were used to just their home setups and maybe didn't have top quality products, going to such a huge upgrade with our Alienware PCs has just absolutely increased the quality of our practice.
I'm just a big fan of Alienware. I think they're the top of the line PCs literally for a reason.
It's definitely the best PC I've ever had by a long way.
Shoutouts to Alienware, great company, love them a lot.
And I have nothing but praise for the product.
That's high praise from some of the best gamers in the world. So thanks again to Alienware for powering us this year in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. And remember, if you want to get your hands on some of the gear that our pro players play on, make sure to check out Alienware on all of their socials and at their website as well.
I think if I didn't have my Alienware, I would go out and purchase one right now.
You know, everyone always says, hey, Smite fans, but nobody ever asks the real important question of how Smite fans. Like, how good is your game running? How good does it look? And how good is your PC to play all of those fun games? Well, if it's not amazing, if it's not top of the line, well, maybe you should get your hands on an Alienware machine. Go over to smitegame.com/Alienware. Use code AWSMITE09 to make sure that you can get your chance at getting one of these amazing PCs that are pros, our production, and even as far as the laptops are concerned that we use over here on the desk. Make sure to get your hands on one of those. Thank you so much to Alienware for coming back in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. Check them out on their socials at Alienware on Twitter and Instagram, and AlienwareArena.com to see what other great offers that Alienware has for you, the fans, today. Because they are a great company. These machines are absolutely insane, and you want to make sure that you get your opportunity to play on those 3090 graphics cards, 64 gigs of RAM. I can tell you just from not having those, that getting something like that, an upgrade like that, would be absolutely immense for me, be immense for some of you fans at home, so you don't have to play on your old school laptop or even on your old school machines. Thank you one more time to Alienware for being the sponsor and at least powering our players in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. It's J-Mac over here on the desk. I got Trelly joining me as well. We're going to talk a little bit about game number 1 because we were asking, going into that game, the question, Charlie, we asked Scream in the pregame interview, how long do you think it'll take you to adjust with the team? How long do you think it's going to take you to kind of get situated with the players in the jungle? Well, the answer to that wasn't very long, apparently, because Scream and the rest of the Dragons kind of popped off in this very first game. They were able to really make some immediate waves going for their team and really get the ball rolling early. And a lot of it, well, I can't say started here, but this is definitely the breakout point for the team.
Yeah, I mean, I said it right after that interview, I think Scream's being humble. I think the Dragons are going to come out swinging in a composition like this. They went with raw damage up against the tank stats, and damage came out on top, right? I mean, it was just there was no S key. It's all W. It's all going in. There's no when you drop Tusky and Piercing Moonlight, things like that happen where you're just going in. There's no going out. And even when there was a small bit of going out, it was just PBM, like throwing out the Scarab's Blessing, saying, okay, dial it back, then we get to go in some more. The kills didn't change too much after this. I mean, not for the Warriors. For the Jade Dragons, they just went up. There was just more kills. PandaCat was facilitated as much as you would want your ADC to, getting to that late game portion, get Kinzexi online, and then just start shredding, right? And that's what seemed to happen here. So, we asked the question, what do the Jade Dragons have to do with this double tank comp with the this Cthulhu in the backline? When the Cthulhu can't get online and you're just being shred through, that there's not much that the Oni Warriors really could do.
And we did see, at least at the beginning of the game, the Oni Warriors tried to put pressure on fineokay, put pressure on that right side of the map, and we saw a 3v3 invade over at the blue buff at one point that was going pretty well for the Warriors. I mean, Dardez almost found a pick onto PBM with Argus kind of battling him out there. We saw at least fineokay and Nika being able to trade out during that little time period. And it looked pretty even to kind of start this game out, but you're right to highlight. I mean, once the damage came online for Screammmmm, once PandaCat was able to get out of the lane and join these team fights, it just felt too difficult for the Oni Warriors to really be able to kind of fight back into this composition. The Osiris was never able to keep up with the damage output that the Tsukuyomi was in the jungle. And so now for the Oni Warriors, maybe the question I'll pose over to you, Charlie, is what kind of changes do they need to make for their drafting? Because maybe it feels a little bit of a draft diff, maybe some still on execution on field, but it kind of feels like the Oni Warriors just didn't really have what it took to get to that back line to really deal with the carries for the Jade Dragons. We'll jump into picks and bans in game number 2 and see what some of those changes are, but is there anything immediate that sticks out to you, Charlie?
I mean, honestly, it's the early pressure, but what do the Oni Warriors have to do about that? You know, I don't think you're banning away the Tsukuyomi. That can't be, you know, that big of an issue for you. It has to be all in the draft itself. I would say picking more of that early presence for the Oni Warriors. Of course, you know, the hi-rez all well and good. The Osiris brings a decent bit of early, but you have to be shutting down what the Jade Dragons were doing there, not just, you know, facilitating your own squad. So moving forward, I imagine the Oni Warriors don't have to change too much about what they did. I would say just throw out that game entirely. There's not too much from game 1 to take into this second game. You know, have a short memory and just try to get active early. That's where the Jade Dragons found their success. If it doesn't translate into the late game, it's going to look well, and it looks like the Oni Warriors aren't going to ban that Yemoja this time. They're just going to take away that Khepri, and they think that's going to be a better look for them.
Do you really think that's the go-to, though? I mean, the Khepri, yes, it definitely was a problem. Being able to remove the revive on the enemy team will allow you to get some more of those picks. But is Yemoja really the trade-off that you're willing to give over to a player like PolarBearMike?
Well, no, I'm not going to say it's a good trade, but it's all they have at this point, right? You got to throw out the game plan from game number 1, realize, and you know, the mindset could have just been, hey, if our kills didn't get denied by that Khepri, we just run through that game. I'm not sure if that's the case, but that's got to be where the Oni Warriors' head's at. So they grab the Xing Chen and the Osiris, both picks I think that can facilitate the early quite well. And the Jade Dragons, they might just do the run back at this point, switching out the Khepri for the Yemoja and then continue what they had just done.
Do you think that with this Osiris pickup, and now a Xing Chen as well for the Oni Warriors, this Osiris didn't work out so well for Qvo in the jungle previously, now still potentially running it back again in game number 2, but do you think that that's the right call for QvoFred? I mean, especially if the Dragons are just going to run back the same 4 of the 5 gods that they have potentially. Is that the call for the Warriors to make?
I don't think the Osiris is ever the issue, you know, in that situation. Maybe how you play the Osiris certainly could have been the case, but switching out just the Hera alone, I think is going to give you some more early presence. We have seen the Chernobog locked in, so there are some cases where that Chernobog could just go mid and Dardez could play it. You know, the AMC was taken away, and he still likes to play those ADCs in the mid lane every once in a while. Or just throw it over to Vote. You know, Vote obviously can go to the Poseidon. He's got some mages that he's been playing in that dual lane as well, so I'm going to hold on to the ambiguity there. But the Jade Dragons actually aren't going to let that Poseidon through. They will take that one away, as well as the Morgan, just in case that is going to be the option. But looks like the Oni Warriors are not going to take away any of the picks for the Jade Dragons, so they will be able to run back anything they really want to, except for that Artemis, right? The Artemis has taken away. Besides that, they could still grab, you know, that Tsukuyomi if they really wanted to. It really just depends on what the Jade Dragons are trying to go for. But yeah, given the Warriors, I think they've already made some adjustments. The Hera wasn't instantly locked in. They've got the Chernobog now for some global pressure, trying to split apart the team fight of the Jade Dragons. So we're sort of seeing the changes they've made already flourish here.
Well, let's see where it goes through. As you mentioned, the Artemis and then the Poseidon Morgan banned away, which Morgan-Daji has been a winning combo for the Oni Warriors many times in the past during this phase, whether you get one or both pieces of that combination. It's usually worked out well for the Warriors, so the Dragons very smart to ban both of them away throughout the course of their bans.
Do you even know
now
who
with the
you're
Oni
fighting?
Warriors, Bologna lock-in does mean this Osiris is going to be going back over to QvoFred, and still some flexibility as to where the Oni Warriors will go with their last pick. Chernobog, we have seen a lot in the duo lane, have seen him go over towards mid and solo, but with Bologna and Osiris there, pretty much throws that one out the window. So now for the Jade Dragons, I mean, Cupid is back open. Is this a pick that you just throw right to PandaCat right away?
I don't see why not. I see no reason not to pick the Cupid here. I'm not going to touch on that because it's being hovered, and until it's locked in, it's not real.
Fair.
But the Cupid is certainly real because it's a great matchup in a Chernobog. Anytime he goes into the wall, you can essentially just cover the option, right? Just drop Fields of Love and say, go ahead, where are you going? You're not dashing out anyway. You're stuck here. And you can usually just force out that ultimate. The Nightmare has no sort of value if it's being forced in lane when there's not a gank opportunity. And it looks like it will switch over to the Pele. See, that's why we don't talk about things like that. They're just baiting us. They hovered the Scylla last time, went to Disco, hovered the Arachne, went to Pele. And still, actually, Pele's not a pick that we see too often, just off the back of Scream as of recent, but that Cupid makes a ton more sense to me. It's got a good matchup up into the Chernobog, and you're just playing for that late game hard carry. That's what PandaCat wants to do. It's what he did last game, and I don't see a reason that he would not be able to do that into a comp like this. You are up against a Bellona and an Osiris, which is a tricky front line to try and battle into, not to mention the Furious Roar from Xing Chen is going to nerf your auto attack damage a little bit, but you still have this stacked roster up against you. You still have the Yemoja, which was taken away from you in game 1. It's not necessarily a downgrade from the Khepri, right? It's still going to bring a ton of control into that team fight. So I imagine the Jade Dragons pretty happy about this one.
Now, the last time that we did see this Pele, it was on Scream. He's the only other person who's brought that one out in Season 9. And that was whenever he was on the Solar Scarabs and faced off against the Camelot Kings. That was a Game 3 situation in which the Scarabs won and took that massive set win for themselves. Now, he didn't have the most impressive KDA that time. It was a 2-3 and 9, but still finding the win at the end of the day. And one of the things that we asked him about this pick was, what was so good about the Pele? And his answer was, well, it brings a lot of early pressure, does a lot of damage, but also some of the change-ups in the items, specifically in that Magi's tree, some of the new items there. Do you kind of agree with that sentiment that these new Magi's glyphs have really kind of maybe brought light to some of these new assassins in the jungle again?
Yeah, I certainly think it changes the dynamic up a bit. However, I think that Pele, still should be getting out pressured by Osiris. I don't think that changes. The itemization shouldn't be changing too much there. Pele has very fast clear with. The issue with the Assassins was which one of them can build Golden Blade and run to farm, right? That's not something that Pele loves to do, but with her 3, she just gets that increased movement speed and can farm pretty effectively anyways. And also her lightning damage was also just a little bit, when we had the junglers come into studio, that was what they were complaining about the most, is that her ult, it doesn't really do as much as it used to. Shell is a pretty good counter against it. So I imagine that Scream just wants to get as ahead as he was early in the Tsukuyomi game. Same sort of style, run to farm as much as possible, go in consistently. You're not worrying about retreating as long as you've got the Yemoja having your back, as long as fineokay is also diving with you. You shouldn't have too much, to worry about in that regard. But there is a little bit you got to worry about because the Warriors still have a very tanky draft, and the Pele rather doesn't love killing those tanks. She's more trying to get to the squishies, of which there are only 2. So if Scream can consistently get to the carries, he's gonna have a good time. But if he's ulting into an Osiris and a Xing Chen, that's not Pele's dream matchup.
And of those 2 carries that are there, one of them is a Soul, who we don't see nearly as often when we're talking about magical hunters. The Olorun kind of comes to the forefront. The Freya for a little while was kind of at the top of the discussions, which, notably enough, we haven't seen a whole lot of Freya ever since her slight change in her nerf, maybe some of the other items that came that way. But now with this kind of rise up of the new Bancroft's items that are coming through with some of the glyphs out there, we've been seeing a little bit more Soul. I mean, how do you kind of feel about Soul coming over into this meta? It's a question that I'll ask over towards maybe the casters to break down a little bit, because we got game number 2 between the Jade Dragons and the Oni Warriors.
Yeah, we'll take care of it, J-Mac. No worries. Jade Dragons and their new jungler, Scream, in game 1. Get themselves off to a great start here in this set up against the Oni Warriors. Now, the Oni Warriors, a team that plays with resilience, a team you expect to be able to bounce back in these longer sets, have plenty of history of that between all 5 members of this team. Now, Scream on the Pele this game, Gore, so sticking with the aggression. On the flip side, though, actually do have a bit of a meeting of the minds. All right, this one will fizzle out. On the flip side, QvoFred sticking with the Osiris. I think the Osiris has got to look good here in this game, or else we might see QvoFred get outpaced yet again.
I mean, that was the biggest problem, and we were kind of talking about it after game 1, where I was like, we know Osiris can get hands-on, but he didn't. And then late game, you're competing with a guy, at least in Tsukuyomi, that is dealing a lot of damage and then jumping in, chasing down the mid laner and dealing even more damage on top of that. So, being able to chase people down, find control like that, I think it was a little difficult for Qvo to keep up pace. Luckily, Scream's on Pele this time around. Granted, How many times have we seen Pele this year? I think once. It's not someone I think that comes around too often. And it is Scream, I think, that played it last time. You know, a couple of games last year, actually, oddly enough, something that I would have argued is in Sam's God Pool as well, so the Dragons should know how to play around this. But it is going to be an interesting change for how this scales up, and I want to see like what kind of changes maybe early game you're going to make already with that mace, you know, not going into Transcendence, so that's immediately a change in build. But I want to see like hands-on. I think you can get a little more interactive quicker, but you're going to have less depth. Also, there's a Chernobog and a Soul on the other side, so diving as deep as like a Tsukuyomi just wouldn't have worked as well anyway. So I want to know where this pressure from Scream is going to be directed and who they decide to focus on.
Well, Gore, you say the word scaling up there, not in reference to this, but just made me think. Oni Warriors are going to have to do some scaling up on their squad when you've got Dardez and Vote. Dardez might be slowed down just a bit because it is a level 2 gank from Scream over to mid. QvoFred will answer, and Scream giveth and he taketh away. And this time, first blood goes to the Oni Warriors.
Look, for the I hyped him up real hard last time around, talking about how he's got the most first bloods in the league. Still true, by the way. Qvo, though, was close on his heels. Same thing for Lasbra. And so making up for a little bit of that. But that's the second time now that Scream has been first blooded in this set. And it didn't put him too far behind, although this time a lot earlier in the game, a lot better for the Osiris, and on a god that is, I think, going to maybe get hands-on a little quicker than what we saw out of Tsukuyomi, but maybe struggle against what an Osiris can output. And you were talking about needing QvoFred to step up on the Osiris. I think we're going to be able to see that now. You've got the kill under your belt. It's going to be a little bit of extra gold. You've got a more uptime to farm. Experience lead's going to go your way. I would like to see Qvo be this hands-on. I want to see Qvo continue plays like that, even if it's not going to come to fruition fully. I mean, if you show up over here in the duo lane just to make them feel a little pressured. See, you know, when that Lord of the Afterlife comes online, I want to see it used aggressively, because I can't remember a single one that happened last game that was aggressively. So, you know, things like that. Just small changes, but I want to see him really dictate the pace of the game.
Yeah, when you got mannequins, that's what you want to do early. Well, gets the heart bomb, but disapparate out and away. Now, a point I was about to make prior to the little mid lane skirmish is that, I mean, the Oni Warriors do have some scaling up to do on their side. Obviously, the Jade Dragons with Pegon and Panda will, but the Soul really gets going later on in the game. Dardez on a Chernobog. We know that the Hunters like to hang out, scale up just a bit. And so, if the Oni Warriors can find that balance score between needing to scale, but when you can hit these power spikes, it could be a really threatening composition if they're able to find more activity later on in the early game, potentially into the mid game. We have talked about some of the magical ADCs, Freya in particular, not as bad in the early game, so still an opportunity for Vote, I think, to remain active over on the left.
Yeah, I'm actually, I think, all around curious to see how things are going to shake out for. Not even just like the general, like some of the Warriors. I'm watching Mike's build specifically as well, but like watching where things go, because we've seen, you know, talking about Vote, we've seen a lot of like the Bancroft's talent up initially. Seems like that's probably where he's going to end up going into the glyph.
Yep.
Getting the Bancroft's claw, then picking up maybe a couple of rings later on, but being more, I just call it maybe mage-esque, right? Playing Soul in this kind of hybrid fashion where it's like your auto attacks still hit pretty hard, but really you're just out there for your abilities.
Disapparate down, but Dardez is going to ult in from mid lane, gets the double root. PandaCat needs all of this healing. Mike would like some as well. Does pick up one of the healing spots. Scream dashes forward, and there's your answer back from the Jade Dragons on the return gank from Scream. The Dragons will knock down Vote.
And I think well played. Look, Mike had no Omi to work with after that Riptide, and so it was on your own, right? It's like, I have some autos that can heal you. You just use your hearts. We're scrambling to get out of here. I think good call from them to retreat the way they did. Great play from Scream to just blink past. Instead of going for the, I'm going to save you guys, he goes for the kill. Because if Vote's gone, whether Vote's able to sustain up or anything like that, it's still a 2v2. Now maybe a 2v3, and he still had a couple autos with his ult active that he maybe could have spread some damage out there. But I like that kind of call, again, just to go to the back line. And specifically on someone like Vote, because Soul has a surprising amount, not even with the lifesteal item, but like just in her kit of survivability. Her one gives her a lot of healing and things like that. So that's a good way to make sure that not only gets shut down, you turn things around, they hit 5 first, but now It's going to even the playing field over here on left.
Like the early look from the Oni Warriors, though. Still 1,000 gold lead, despite the 1 kill being traded back from the Jade Dragons. I think solo lane has every opportunity to be dynamic here again in this game. fineokay just ran things over in game 1 on this King Arthur. Looked amazing. Nika fell a bit by the wayside on the Cthulhu, was just burned down too quickly, too consistently. Changes things up, goes with the Bologna, gets the death toll, Berserker shield. The game of chess between Nika and fineokay. Yes, of course, through the laning phase, but into the team fight phase. I think has every chance to run things just the same as these junglers do, because you know what Bologna gets done, you know what King Arthur gets done. 2 of the best to get it done. Won't get to finish that thought because Vote being ganked by Scream. There is plenty of burst damage and a Fields of Love and a second kill of the game for the Dragons jungler. And after falling for first blood, Scream will notch his second.
Dardez is very, well, happy. I'm not going to say lucky, just happy that those walls come down and is able to dash away, because otherwise you were between a wall and a Pele, and you were not going to get out of. Scream was waiting to see if he could continue that chase. It goes for the Crusher early on. Immediately, though, going to the duo lane and getting active, I think is impressive, because you know that Pegon's going to be able to relax and hold their own. You know that fineokay up against a Bologna, there's going to be a lot of survivability on the right. Go for the person that doesn't have the safest disengage. You know, Vote, you can go immune, your damage immune, your CC immune, all of that good stuff, but you still walk at a normal pace, right? You're not faster.
A little bit of pressure has been important for the Oni Warriors over the last couple of games. Continues here in game 2. This time confirmed by the Jade Dragons.
No way.
And Vote, already 0-2. If that stun would have connected, PandaCat doesn't have Fields of Love, so would have needed every ounce of damage to connect. But really that storyline continues for the Jade Dragons, where specifically against Vote, they have just leveled pressure over there. 0-2 on this Soul. And that often is the name of the game, isn't it? Let's slow down the magical ADC.
It's unfortunate because Vote and Neil hit 5 before PBM and Panda, and now PBM and Panda hit 7 before they could. So, you know, the matter of a couple of levels and a huge exchange in terms of experience and gold that's going into their sides and into their pockets over there. And a lot of that is because of Scream's presence, right? Scream being able to do something like this.
Now it's Nika being ganked by the Pele, and it'll be fineokay on the slam down to give the Jade Dragons their 3rd. All 3 affected by Scream on the Pele. At least through 2 game score. Now you can't, I don't want to stretch out this small data pool over the rest of the year for the Dragons, but in the last couple of games we've seen the first 2 of the new jungler for the Jade Dragons. It has looked a bit more dynamic, a bit more active early on.
And man, we have a feast this weekend because we've got
we get a lot.
3 sets of Dragons. They're starting today, they're starting tomorrow versus the Scarabs, they're starting on Sunday as well. So if you're looking at how well does this team do, I mean, at the minimum, you're going to get 6 games, right? And that's assuming that it's all 2-0s, whether they win or lose. At max, that's 9 games of footage you'll have on screen.
We'll be able to figure out a lot about this Jade Dragons team, including can you steal away a Gold Fury? PandaCat drops Fields of Love, but burst damage from the Oni Warriors, and what a great call.
Yeah.
From an objective-minded team. Maybe what needs to be an objective-minded team in this game. Oni Warriors pull out the Gold Fury before the Dragons can respond. And we have heaped so much praise on the Dragons, and NeilMah won't get caught out, and the Dragons' ability to play aggressive. But Gore, they have fallen about 1.5K gold behind. That Gold Fury makes a big difference.
I think, you know, much to what you're saying, we have to look at the fact that the Warriors have been playing this incredibly well. I mean, look at their draft, right? This is a draft, the Osiris, the Bologna, the Xingqian, really good at engaging, but we've only gotten to see a couple of them in certain circumstances. But what else can they do when you've got a Chernobog and a Soul? You're gonna burn objectives down. I like that Gold Fury call because it plays to their strengths early on, and they recognize that there's not like a big secure on the Dragons, right? The most you have is some damage, maybe from the Fields of Love, maybe from Pele's ult, maybe Pegon, but really nothing like a Kuku Lakan ult or anything like that, a Kraken, things that secure.
QvoFred dashed out now by Scream. Eagles rally up down from Nika, but not enough, and now it's a killing spree for Scream. This is nuts what he's doing for the Jade Dragons here in game 2. The River's Rebuke from Mike on the other side of the map helps set up a kill for himself. And now Mike 1-0 here in game 2. And now a lot of that, again, is still carryover from Scream and Scream's impact on the left side of the map early. Now Vote falls to 0-3. because there's just been way too much pressure from the Dragons.
And I love this call, right? Because it's getting PandaCat ahead. He went for Transcendence, so you're already stacking. Things are going to be slow. Same thing goes for mid. Same thing kind of goes for Mike with the Thebes. Whereas you're looking over towards Vote, and as we see Golden Hand, like PandaCat's close to 2K, approaching 2K, so we'll be able to back and match that tier 2 at minimum. But you've got the Bancross talent. Like you're not the strongest form yet for Seoul just now. So I really like that they're putting the pressure on while they still have the chance to do so. And unfortunately, it is this balancing point. Kills are very heavily in their favor, and I think they're doing that well. But I'm looking towards the Pyromancers. Late game, I'm looking towards Fire Giants. If either of those are looked at by the Warriors, they're going to burn them quicker than the Dragons will usually have a chance to respond. And more so, when or if, I should say, the Warriors get a Fire Giant. Towers, objectives, my God, they're going to get shredded.
They will. But the Oni Warriors got to be in a position to take the Fire Giant, to take the Pyromancer. Dragons rotate quickly. And that is the first Lord of the Afterlife defensively of the game. So start a counter in your brain, because a lot of that was happening for QvoFred by the end of game 1, where you just did not see Osiris diving into the back. Didn't have the opportunity. So we're not calling it a trend yet. But don't love that visual if you're an Oni Warriors fan.
Yeah, definitely a little too reminiscent, right? Especially around the Pyromancer. It's a big turning point, I think, for the Dragons to be able to showcase where their aggression can lie. And a lot of it, in this case, you're looking at discussions of like what Mike's going to be able to do. But PandaCat, with the build that he had last game, or even a similar build for this game, could and will deal a lot of damage out on this Cupid. Scream has already been incredibly hands-on, but I don't know that Scream is going to be like the late-game guy. Probably going to do well just because of the frontliners on this team, but I think it's fineokay is who I zone in on, because when fineokay has been able to rotate to these fights, you get things like that, a small steal, or you get the Pyromancers, you get a lot of these interesting engages, and it's this King Arthur's presence and what fineokay has done on it that really worked out well for him in game 1, and I think it so far is kind of bullying Nika here in game 2. He's 2 levels up.
Yeah, and Gore, there was 1 or 2 levels up in the jungle for Scream as well. Pegon a bit ahead, 2 levels for Mike, 1 for PandaCat. So at least an experience lead for every single lane on the map right now for the Jade Dragons. A great look at this squad. And the Oni Warriors have been a very, very good team throughout the phase here in phase 2. So to put on this type of performance, could be a solo kill. No, Nika will sustain up just fine. A burst of healing. It's like mail of renewal for Nika in this game. PandaCat ganked by Neil and Vote. Whirlwind of Rage and Steel. Beads get used. PandaCat getting ganked by 4. You have to get the kill, and the Oni Warriors are able to do so, but now Scream on the counter cat goes in against 4. Deletes Vote. Had a real good look at a couple more kills, but now the Jade Dragons can rotate in behind.
Look at all the damage you got out there with Mike coming over. Pegon's going to be a while, but look at this River's Rebuke.
There's the River's Rebuke from Mike. Forces Dardez on and off the wall. Pegon in behind. Pegon has Apple. Pegon has Strive. And Pegon, he's got damage. Goodbye, QvoFred. Pegon with the double. And the Jade Dragons from across the map, they will funnel in. They'll miss out the 3rd kill. NeilMah will escape. But now it's Nika under a bit of threat.
Look, you get a 3 for 2. Pegon should be out of here. I think the rest of the Dragons are fine. I think you're happy with that, right? I mean, Scream, well, let's restart from the beginning. Panda, at some point in there, I have to imagine, guys, everyone's over here. Either get something on right or kill them now, because they just invested so much. I mean, the initial investment on that was wild to kill off PandaCat. And I think Scream does a good job, not laying in wait. If he is patient and he waits for the regroup of the team, everybody on the Warriors gets out there. Maybe they get a single kill, but for the most part, they're going to be able to disengage and get out. So Scream goes in. He looks for the immediate kill, gets a lot of splash damage out there as well. Does it matter that he's going to die? Not as much, because that was the setup play. He gets Vote. I think that's a huge win, even if it goes 1 for 1 there or 2 for 1 there. But then the rotation, Mike being able to have the CC, slow people down, not the perfect lockdown by any means, but enough that Pegon's able to get in there, that you've got fineokay. You've got this presence from the Dragons that's able to loop around. And with that tier 1 already gone, so good work by PandaCat just succeeding in lane. It makes it a lot easier for Pegon, who had virtually no mana, barely any health to work with, but he still comes in and gets a double and gets out with his life. I think the setup from that play, I mean, that was just really well done from them to read the situation. And unfortunately, it was a great play by the Warriors until that point. I mean, if you get that kill on Vote, You fall back, there's a Fury available for you. You can strip the jungle. And in theory, putting everybody over there, it could have worked out well. The Dragons just responded in spades.
Been fantastic team play from the Jade Dragons. Now, Gore, I think what we were concerned about was that Qvo is potentially going to just get outpaced. The Osiris has been a mainstay, and I'll return to that thought after we see what happens with the Primal Furies. The Jade Dragons have pulled it. They dropped a lot of ultimates. They better get it. And the Dragons are able to confirm the Primal Fury, but a Riptide out from Mike will keep everyone safe. Objective to the Jade Dragons. But it is starting to happen how we worried at Might Gore, where 2 levels behind in the jungle now is QvoFred. Scream is continuing to just melt damage off the Oni Warriors. Could be a rotation in from Dardez, and Scream might leave this fight empty-handed. It looks like he will, and that's what a Turnipog brings. And that's exactly what the Oni Warriors needed, a rotation out from Dardez to help keep Vote alive.
I was wondering, 16 minutes seemed way too early for a Fire Giant. Luckily, Pyromancer's coming up, so with that investment, knowing that Dardez is on the other side of the map, look at the Dragons reading the situation. They've got a numbers advantage, and they're going to use it.
Yeah, but Dardez, right, can't rotate into this fight, just used it to help out his teammate on left. Jade Dragons confirm the Pyromancer, and they'll now disengage. It is a pretty heavy investment defense from the Oni Warriors. They get a kill on a Scream, yes, but Aegis out of Vote and ultimate out of Dardez. Leaves Vote a bit more susceptible, but he'll be alive to shred down this tower. Get a bit more gold for the Oni Warriors. So as far as stemming the bleeding, Gore, the Warriors are doing about as well as they could.
And I think that the Warriors are still not only in a good spot there, but when you start looking towards, like, again, Fire Giant pushes, Fire Giant fights, kind of a coin toss. I mean, Fields of Love was the big secure that happened there around the Fury, and then when you've got the River's Rebuke from Mike, theoretically you can lock some people away. And just a quick scan, they don't have a shell up just yet. Hell, Neil's not even level 12. He hasn't been able to pick up the second relic just yet. And so nothing that lets you get through that River's Rebuke if it's thrown down. With that plus fineokay, I think the Dragons are going to have an advantage around a fire, but there is at least a discussion to be had that if the Warriors are able to take that 50-50 and win it, they've got the best objective push that's going to exist in the game, and so a lot of the towers are going to fall down from the Dragons if the Warriors can get them in that spot. And it's nowhere near a large enough lead, I think, for the Dragons now that it's a takeaway, right? It's 17.5 minutes in. I think that they're still in a good spot.
Oh my goodness, double Riptide, double Strife. The Jade Dragons initiate perfectly, but now you need double the damage to knock down Nika. Another Riptide and a River's Rebuke means kill for fineokay. The tier 1 tower, the next on the menu. And that's an initiation for you. The Jade Dragons will get some more gold.
And look, they can continue this however they want. Pressure on the tier 2? Absolutely. It's just going to get you more gold. And better yet, more pressure. Tier 2 and mid, this is like the most important tower.
Stun, strike.
Oh my god.
Burst. Goodbye, Oni Warriors. Maybe not to death, but out of this fight, the Jade Dragons will walk down now a tier 2 tower with just, I mean, Mike has just been on point with these Riptides. The stripes from Pegon on the back end, the stun from fineokay at the start of that fight. Gord's simply been too much for the Oni Warriors to fight up against. And now the Dragons really extend out this gold lead. And you're starting to get into that mindset for the Dragons, where Fire Giant's next on the menu.
Yeah, I think that this is a really good spot for them to be in. Again, just the amount of pressure that they put into mid.
Yeah, he'll die.
Yeah, he'll die. I mean, you never know.
We never know.
He's surrounded by 5. Maybe he walks out of that.
Wow, now that this is massive. Great. This is the moment for the Oni Warriors in reality. You get a big pick onto fineokay, first of the game, and you're around the Fire Giant. And the Dragons simply won't be in time. The Oni Warriors,
that's a good
with
call.
the perfect call on the map, get themselves Fire Giant. Still behind in gold, but do deny the big objective from the Dragons.
And look, it's exactly what I was saying earlier. Not only do they burn the objective fast, but now they're going to be able to burn towers. I mean, you've got Dardez and Vote. Look at the builds at this point. A second ring finish there for Vote. You've got the Silver Branch completed, plus the Atalantas there for Dardez. It is going to be very simple. I think the Dragons can step up. Tier 2's not going to be far-fetched for them, especially with Scream's positioning to try and defend here. But this is a moment that you might have to give it up because the tower might just die too quickly.
Pegon can poke out some good damage. Numbers advantage for the Oni Warriors. This
Good
will really matter.
Riptide.
Oh no, double Riptide onto Vote. The Disapparate will just get out of range, and the Strife hits as well. Vote under an onslaught of CC, somehow able to survive. Now it's a dive onto Pegon in the back, and a killing spree for Dardez, but it's an immediate answer back from Scream. PandaCat out of the River's Rebuke, And Mike has just been on point, but still in the backcourt is Pele wailing away. And on the front line, PandaCat's doing the same.
Look, but Scream kept him grouped up. If fineokay can find a stun, I mean, maybe you could chase down Vote. That one,
teleport.
it feels like it's going to be, I was going to say, maybe too difficult, I think, to try and lock this down. No deep towers, maybe a lockdown on Qvo. No, stun isn't going to connect there, so I think the chase might just be moot, and they need to fall back. But I honestly, I would argue salvaging a very problematic situation, right? You lose a tier 2, you get a couple kills, but you take a couple Fire Giants off the board, and you manage to make things look good. I think that, again, for the Warriors, that was just a solid set of plays. Unfortunately for them, the fight doesn't go exactly the way they want, but they get rid of Pegon, they get rid of Scream. Those are very, very high priority kills, and they burn a lot of relics in the process. I mean, Dardez is about to have Aegis back up, still has the beads, while Vote is, like you said, under the onslaught of a ton of CC and maybe going to be a little more susceptible over the next push. There's a lot more safety, I think, on the side of the Warriors that is going to warrant and allow them to be a little more free-flowy. They've got a little bit of time to work with for the Fire Giant buff. I could see them trying to go for another tier 2.
Well, at 1.4k gold at 21 minutes, suddenly minuscule. Jade Dragons still in control of the gold, but maybe not the pacing of the game, and that's going to change here if the Oni Warriors, and they will, take up this Gold Fury. Things stabilize, Gore, and it is all on the back of fineokay getting picked out by the blue buff. Oni Warriors, they get the pick, they immediately pull FG, and they've got the ability to shred it down. And now the entirety of the course of this game completely changed. Scream has been slowed down a bit. It's off to a 3-1, 4-1 start, died a few times in a row now. So the Oni Warriors have some answers to what the Jade Dragons are asking.
And I actually really like, speaking of Scream, I've been looking for the end to talk about his build because, you know, we talked about the Crusher, I think, earlier. Brawlers isn't too outrageous to think of, but it's the Magi's Revenge alongside the Erendite. So if someone pops your bubble and then you choose to maybe say ult that person, you're just running them down. If you ult at someone else, either way, no matter what here, Scream's going to have an advantage chasing the Warriors down, and I think that is going to be, in the right circumstances, very fun to watch. I think in the wrong circumstances, it might just put you in the middle of them without much to do.
Looks like the Oni Warriors, remember, they still have 3 FG buffs, are going to backpedal away. 30 seconds left on the buff, minute and a half then until the respawn. But we have started to reach that pivot point, Gore. When you talked about Chernobog and Soul earlier in the game and simply just needing time to scale up. Vo was jumped on constantly, 0-4 still, but at least has added some assists. Able to get Bancross, couple rings online, could be a Typhon's Fang after this. So Vote has been able to get that build underway, scale up. Dardez has as well out of mid. These Hunters, regardless of a slow start for one of them, have reached that point where the Jade Dragons have to respect the damage.
I mean, he caught up experience-wise, and like you said, he actually, and I love this, because we haven't been seeing it. We've seen a lot of Bancroft's Claw. Goes for the nimble Bancroft's talent. So here he's going to have that extra attack speed. With the Typhon's Fang, you're going to have a lot specifically a lot of lifesteal. But now, for every 40 power you have, and this was the discussion we had when it first came out, was, you know, the rings aren't necessarily known for giving a lot of power, but you get 100 from this item alone. So that's going to be some attack speed, a little bit more there from the Typhons, and add up the 2 rings. So a lot of attacks here from Vote, and with the beads now available, the Aegis now available, your 3 that disapparate available and ready, I think what we're going to see is a much more survivable Vote. And yeah, you jumped on him 4 times earlier, but the last time they invested heavily into him, he walked away with it. So that could have been a 5. I think that's going to be a big problem. You know, if you choose between him, then you have to kill Dardez. If you don't kill one, the other one's going to pop off. It's very, I want to say, like Leviathans-esque with having 2 huge threats between like Zap and Shinto on their team. Here it's Dardez and Vote. And it feels like no matter what, he kill one, the other one's still going to have a really big potential.
Well, Doug gave us the look. 550 or so power for Vote. A 10% attack speed, and a lot of that attack speed going into the FG. The Oni Warriors have pulled it. The Jade Dragons here to answer. fineokay alone with 3, but fineokay is doing better than fine. He is winning the fight. Suddenly, Dardez and Vote, though, have turned around the damage. Mike in on the assist on the back line. On the flip side of the fight, the Oni Warriors looking for PandaCat. They won't get him, though. Instead, Pegon notches the first on Nika. QvoFred into the back. QvoFred into the grayscale. The Jade Dragons have stifled the dive of the Oni Warriors.
And coalesced 3 fights into 1, and now they're just going to be able to chase him down, and this is just picking up the remainder, right? This is the scraps on the plate that are left for the Warriors.
They're not going to FG at all. Instead, the Jade Dragons running straight to the Phoenix, it looks like. And I wonder,
they have a ward?
Do they have long enough on
fineokay's
the death
gonna get back
timers?
in.
You absolutely get this Phoenix. We'll see the body language of the Jade Dragons. fineokay will teleport back through. Are you trying to end the game now in 25 minutes, or do you double back for the Fire Giant? Dardez is still on the map, but one lonely Chernabog against all 5 of the Jade Dragons as they step forward. The Jade Dragons on the precipice of a 2-0 with their brand new jungler. Scream looks like he'll end this game at 5-4-5. Dardez and the Oni Warriors will respawn. Nika's got to make some magic happen, but the Eagles rally will fall short, and the Jade Dragons plus Scream get the 2-0.
I mean, look, that is phenomenal play, and a lot of it, again, that last team fight. You recognize it, you mentioned it even. After that Fire Giant from the Warriors, while it was a great call, it was a pick onto fineokay, but they only get, what, a tier 2, and a Fury. They equal the gold out. Everything becomes an even state for them. Then you go into the next fight, and there's a little skirmish with fineokay and like 3 people. Qvo's chasing Scream, and then you have a poor, unfortunately isolated player for the Warriors, surrounded by the rest of the Dragons. Those 2 fights coalesce. fineokay kind of baits people down. It becomes 1 fight. That separates back into 2, but then it's just scraps, slay them, kill them, and like you said, at that point, death timers just long enough that you have enough room to work with, and you can just rush it down mid.
Look, that's an aggressive, in-your-face style of Jade Dragons that I'm sure fans are happy to see here. And that's a very Scream-esque game here in Game 2. It goes like 5-4 and something, right? Like high deaths, but pretty high impact in the kill feed. A great luck for the Jade Dragons and their new jungler in their first of 3 sets here this weekend. Plenty more Jade Dragons plus Scream action to be had, but no more for this set. They'll get the 2-0 win over the Oni Warriors, and we will head back to the desk.
Thank you so much, Dolson and Gormizer, for that cast and for that game. Wow, what a showing for the Jade Dragons' brand new jungler Scream to come out and have 2 impressive games back-to-back in the jungle to find a 2-0 over the Oni Warriors. And that game started off completely commanding for the Jade Dragons. I mean, you look over at Vote, at one point he's 0-3. You see that Scream is like 3-0 himself. 3-1, as he's completely dominating that left side of the map. Right side's going pretty even. And then we see finally some fight back, some pressure put onto PandaCat by the Oni Warriors. That opens up the door for them to take a Fire Giant, kind of even this game out. But then one final team fight, and I think Gormizer put it best, was 3 different team fights coalesce into 1 in that final little moment there for the Jade Dragons to take the victory.
Yeah, it was interesting because, you know, Qvo gets very active early, finds a first blood on a Scream, and then immediately after that, Scream just says, that's not going to stop me. I'm going right to that duo lane on this Pele, consistently going to get a kill, then head back over, set fineokay up real nice in solo lane. So even though getting off to not the best start on a pick like Pele, it did not stop the aggression out of Scream one bit. And this is sort of the playstyle that we expected from him. You know, even though his kill count was high, his deaths were also high because he's just getting in there and trying to be as active as possible. He was able to facilitate the Dragons, and going into a set, like you just mentioned, where you got 3 games in 1 weekend, you gotta come out swinging. You have to come out. This is a massive win for them to continue the momentum, because there's no time to rest. Tomorrow they're gonna be opening us off as well.
Yeah, it's going to be a long weekend for the Jade Dragons. They'll get plenty of reps in with their brand new jungler Scream on the team. So if this is how set number 1 looks up against another one of the top teams, the Jade Dragons have definitely shown that it's not going to take them maybe as long as fans were predicting, maybe as long as we were predicting them, to be able to kind of get in that groove. You see a 5-4-5 slash line, which sounds kind of crazy for Scream, but I mean, when you go and you look at the stat page for Scream on the website, when you pull up all of his stuff, his kills are always really high, highest in the league. His deaths are usually right up there with him, but that is just the style of play that he goes for, and it really does feel like Scream is a perfect fit for this Jade Dragons' very aggressive style of play.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to go in and get the kill. He'll die trying, but it's going to, you know, set up for the rest of the squad. I mean, we saw it time and time again. If Scream was going to die, the rest of the team could still clean up. fineokay had a great performance. Pegon was able to clean up at the little end of that dual lane skirmish where Pegon sort of rotated in around purple buff and got, I believe, a double, maybe even a triple kill at that point. So a lot of cleanup potential when you have an aggressive jungler like this that can facilitate for you. So great to see the Jade Dragons not only, I'm not going to say bounce back, because this is really their first look at their new roster, so they're meshing pretty well, and this is, I think, the style of play that they were looking for, right? They want to come out swinging, they want to come out of the gates with aggression, and it looks like it's working for them.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of that discussion, you know, are they up on the rise, are they up on the fall, are they kind of in that plateau? We've kind of hit the plateau now. We'll see if it changes a little bit for the Jade Dragons. We've got the mid laner for the Dragons standing by, Pegon from the Jade Dragons, for our post-game interview. Congrats on your 2-0 win over the Warriors. How does it feel now that you got your first competitive set in with your new jungler, Scream?
The games feel really good. It's been a lot of fun to play with Scream.
Just as simple as that, you know, new jungler, maybe a little bit of a new style over into the jungle. You know, Scream and Sam kind of similar in their playstyles, but sometimes Scream feels a little more aggressive. Do you kind of see that difference between those two?
Yeah, Scream's a big leader in game. You know, he just tells us what to do, and that's something that Sam was lacking a little bit, leadership role.
Okay, so maybe a little bit more shot calling out there in the jungle helps you out into the mid. You guys have, you know, not just this one save, you guys have 2 more. I mean, how do you think you know, your sets are going to go for the remainder of your weekend now that you got the first one under your belt?
We're feeling pretty good. We think we're going to win both these sets.
Okay. Nice and easy for Pegon and the Jade Dragons. Congratulations on your 2-0 win. And, yeah, maybe you can get the 2-0s on your remaining sets. Best of luck to the rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
Pegon's a man of action.
Hey, short and sweet to the point. I mean, that's how it is sometimes. It's hey, he's fun. He makes the shot calls for us. We think we're going to do pretty good. Easy as that for Pegon. Easy as that for the Jade Dragons. Find themselves a 2-0 victory over the Oni Warriors to start out our weekend. And that was set number 1 of our day. We've got 1 more set to go. Let's take a look at the schedule to see what that set's going to be. It's going to be the Olympus Bolts and the Dardez Titans to close out our Friday. And then make no mistake about it, that is 6 more games for the rest of the weekend after today. Both of our days, Saturday and Sunday, starting out at 11 a.m. And I'm sure that not just myself, but also next group on the desk is going to be hammering that into your brain that we're starting at 11 a.m. for the remainder of this weekend after today. So make sure that you are there. And it's also going to be Jade Dragons starting both of those days every time. Them against the Scarabs tomorrow, the highlight match of the week probably, and then the Dardez Titans and the Jade Dragons over on Sunday. Camelot Kings and Bolts is also going to be another one. We got a really good set of games over on our Saturday, but we've also got another really good set coming up next, as I said, with the Olympus Bolts and the Dardez Titans. Olympus Bolts sitting at that 2nd seed right now, so we can take a look at the standings and see where everything is going to make their shakeup out there at the very least. Olympus Bolts at that that 2nd seed, and if I'm not mistaken, Olympus Bolts are guaranteed their 2nd seed right now, no matter what the results of this set or their Camelot Kings set is going to be, because they are 2 full sets over anybody else at this point. So it's going to be very good for the Bolts if they can at least find their 1 win over the Dardez Titans, guarantee that 2nd seed. If they can find 2-0s here and then against the Kings in the later part of the weekend, I think they have a chance to even take 1st seed away.
Yeah, that would be massive, but Jade Dragons getting to jump up 2 spots as well, sending the Oni Warriors down to that 6th spot. This is what we were talking about before this set going in, how the standings are going to start shaking up if the Dragons are able to get this win, so that's going to be pretty massive. They're making their record going to be even, so they're not having a losing record any longer. And I imagine the mindset being, you know, Pegon didn't give us too much words, but I saw the confidence in his eyes. They want to continue that win streak, and they want to keep, you know, staying on top. And I think the jungle is making a good mesh for them.
Yeah, they definitely want to try and get as many more wins as they can for the Jade Dragons to make their end of phase as good as they can as we get ready to lead in towards Masters. That's it for our first set. We're going to have the Olympus Bolts and the Dardez Titans coming up right after this break.